Welcome to Be the Change. I'm going to tell you some major points of my life that initially shaped me and finally led me from a superstitious worldview to a reality-based view. Spoiler, it all works out in the end. My early life is not particularly unusual. Some aspects were pretty bad, some were really good. I was just a slightly off-center regular guy who endured a couple of cultural shocks in my teens. That said, in my early life, I was twice under the care of mental health professionals. Care is too strong. I've been seen by two for a total of 5 sessions. The first was a psychiatrist and the other a psychologist trained in behavioral modification therapy. Neither time was I suffering from anything I would call then or now a psychological issue. At least, not the issue that caused me to be seen. So, if not psychological, what caused those adventures in mental health? The cause is beliefs, as simple and complex as that. The part of our mental health not governed by physiology and chemistry is determined by what we believe. Our behaviors, attitudes, and reactions are correlated with what we believe about the environment we find ourselves in, what we believe about ourselves and others, what we believe about our place in our communities and societies. The better our beliefs fit with the beliefs of the majority, the more healthy we feel. Generally, engaged conformity is required to feel right. Conformity, though, comes with its own set of issues and is often a significant cause of distress. And it's not just our individual beliefs, though. Would that it was that simple. It's our beliefs against the background of communal, national, societal, religious, and common beliefs. If you feel distress or have a problem functioning in your social, work, or family activities, it may not be a problem with you. Sometimes it is the problem people are having with you. One current and obvious example of this is conversion therapy. Being different is a real issue for people. Your mental health and sometimes your humanity will be called into question if you seem too different. Further, we are taught that the degree to which we are mentally healthy is determined by the degree of our effectiveness at functioning in the activities society has laid out. While drifting too far to one side, there is a point at which being ineffective is simply dangerous to you and others. There is also an arrow in the other direction, where simply not meeting the expectations of your community or society can be, by consensus definition, a mental illness. One gets around being diagnosed by having a lot of people with beliefs close to yours and having the combined beliefs reasonably inside the normal range for a given culture. For example, being a young Earth creationist is not a mental illness. If, though, there were only one true believer, they might be diagnosed as delusional. So back to me. My first encounter with a mental health professional was in high school. I think it was my sophomore year. At the time, I showed no interest in girls as objects of lust. This really bothered my mother. She insisted I see a doctor about it. The first, an MD, who asked me a lot of questions about my sexual behaviors and attitudes, then did a hormone panel. All hormones were normal for my age. He suggested a psychiatrist. My mother readily agreed. In the first session, the psychiatrist explored the possibility that I might be attracted to boys instead. This was a decade before homosexuality was removed from the DSM. We determined that I was not sexually attracted to boys any more than I was to girls. In the second session, he worked on the notion that I might be borderline antisocial. Another session going nowhere, though I was getting really frustrated and my hostility was certainly showing. He did finally ask me if I thought it was a problem that I didn't seem to want a lot of friends or that I wasn't sexually interested in anyone. When I said no to both questions, he concluded that I was not diagnosable, though I did have signs. My mother, my MD, and my psychiatrist believed there was a serious issue with me that needed to be resolved, while mostly never asking my opinion on the issues. When at last one did ask, he clearly didn't see any way he could help me with my problem because I saw no need for help. From their point of view, I was resisting the offering of help and avoiding facing something serious. Turns out they were right. I was resisting and avoiding help. I didn't recognize the real issue, nor could I have articulated it at the time. With hindsight gained with a bit more life experience, I saw that I was avoiding the overwhelming stupidity of everyone's superstitious thinking. The reality of my social behaviors and sexuality was not thinkable or allowable by my mother or my healthcare professionals. To them, I was not normal, and that was bad. The keys in that last sentence are normal and bad. This wasn't the first or last time when my opinions and behaviors were considered too far outside of normal. And every single time I was caught up in a string of other people's worry and concern for my mental health. Do you know what happens when adults tell a child over and over again that there is something wrong with them? The child believes it and becomes ashamed of their deficiencies. The reaction to the shame can vary greatly, but it won't be pretty. Tell a child they are not socializing correctly and that not trying to fit in is a really, really bad thing, and they will come to believe that they are either bad or simply broken. Tell a child that the games he or she wants to play are not normal and that the child should want to play normal kid games like tag or hide and go seek instead of playing doctor. And they will eventually need a real doctor. All my favorite games, then and now, involve nudity, and I had enough friends who played those games in the late 1950s. We could never talk about it, of course, because those games were considered bad and shameful. Telling a child they are bad and wrong about the way they see the world will inevitably create beliefs that can wreak havoc on a kid's long-term mental health. Continue to reinforce those beliefs through a person's teens, and it will not be pretty at all. Until recently, I had never heard the term gaslighting. Now I see that it is a favorite technique of my mother, my doctors, and my schools. You must have school spirit, after all. And let us not leave out telling the introvert they are broken for not wanting a lot of social time, and they should engage in the school activities like attending the dances and sporting events. They didn't know they were gaslighting. They weren't trying to make me crazy. The adults around me really thought something was wrong with me for not wanting to be like them. They were operating on closely held and widely believed superstitions and being insistent that I too believe or act like I believed. So, with that not fitting in story, plus a few lesser and reinforcing ones that my mother, many of my teachers, and peers installed, I did not pursue my first real dream. I wanted to go to UC Berkeley and study physics or electrical engineering. But I knew I would simply have to drop out because I would not fit in. So in the late 1960s, I joined the US Navy. You know, that place where not fitting in is the hallmark of success. It was relatively safe, the social rules clear. My skill as a self-taught electronics technician kept me out of trouble throughout my 20-year career. But not fitting in was still an issue in that part of my life. So while I was in recruit training, a Navy doctor set me up with the behavioral therapist. After 3 sessions with her, but not really because of her, I discovered something important about myself. I had no idea who I really was. Creating an identity based on a collection of what was wrong with me simply did not give me a way forward. Life was simply a never-ending struggle to not be discovered as too pathetic to be allowed to live. First up, deal with my feelings of ignorance. So I pursued my bachelor's degree piecemeal over the next several years. I studied both physics and psychology. I always had a strong need to understand how everything works. Now I was especially interested in how I worked. I finally realized that I had to find my own truths rather than simply accepting what I had been told. Psychology and sociology deal with population averages. Psychology contrasts the individual against a broad average of what is common in the culture for that person's peer group. For instance, what the culture expects of its young men and young women. This is not a workable way to create one's life. This is a way for cultures to shoehorn children into expected roles. My simmering culture rebellion finally boiled over. The first thing that showed up almost immediately was that my beliefs about myself were not correlated with reality in any way, shape, or form. They didn't conform to social expectations, but so what? Social expectations don't conform to reality either. All this simply meant that I was disappointing members of my social and societal circles. And that is definitely not my problem. Suddenly, I had a replacement umbrella belief. I became proud of not fitting in. Notice the problem with that? It's still a belief about myself that was a comparison of me against others and their normative expectations. Different belief, same problem. Only in the new flipped belief, I was the good boy and everyone else was bad. Very quickly, that belief failed me too. I was starting to be mean, and it did not solve my upset at being uncomfortably different. Making everyone else wrong was not having the effect of making me feel right. I was a senior enlisted person at this point, and I could use this belief to my advantage, but it was a dangerous game. I was in my mid-30s when my straw man of reality fell off its pole for the second time. This time, though, I concluded that I had been lied to my entire life, and that the liars mostly didn't know they were lying. I had taken enough classes in psychology to realize that the entire set of human cultures belong to and represent the breadth and depth of abnormal psychology. And that everyone is a chronic liar, even or especially if they don't know they're lying, as long as what they said had truthiness. As coined by Stephen Colbert, truthiness is a truthful or seemingly truthful quality that is claimed for something, not because of supporting facts or evidence, but because of a feeling that it is true or a desire for it to be true. It is the giant bear trap that maintains superstitious thinking. So my entire life and belief structure was a house of cards built on a floodplain. Every emotional upset stormed over the levees and knocked me down. I realized this wasn't a mental illness, this was a philosophical illness. Time to read, time to try rationality, time to recreate myself and dump my beliefs, all of them. First belief to go in tearing down my view of the world was morality, or at least the idea that there is anything easily called objective morality. Many religious people like to use the concept that objective moral laws must have a moral law giver. I'll consider that as soon as any of them effectively demonstrate the existence of objective moral laws that aren't based on some receding point of subjective attitudes about thoughts, opinions, and behaviors. So there it was, the starting point of creating my new rational personal philosophy. There are no such things as right, wrong, and good, bad. The universe simply does not have a moral position and could not care less about the inhabitants of this lone planet. So, armed with nothing is bad or wrong, and if the apologist's arguments are correct, then I can do anything I want, like rape, murder, steal, right? Sure, changes nothing. I could always do anything I want. But of course, I don't want to do these things. Why not? It certainly isn't the fear of punishment, which seems to be the point of view of most cultures and is the basis for retributive justice. If we punish hard enough, bad people will stop doing bad things. Hasn't worked that way in recorded history, so let's keep trying that approach and see if something different happens. I had to answer the why not question. The second pillar of my new philosophy became something like do no harm. That didn't work very well until I had defined do and harm satisfactorily. The first cut sounded too much like my behaviorist mantra to me of fit in the guise of unit cohesion. Sacrifice for the good of your ship, which would be fine if it hadn't sounded to me like pretend to be a normal human being. Pretend to enjoy the division, department, and ship's parties for the good of morale. Oops. My expanded harm definition had to include me. So some version of do no harm to myself or others. Consequently, do no harm had to be defined carefully but broadly. This took a few years. My first course of action was to avoid people even more strongly than the introverted Lynn was wont to do. Can't harm people if I'm never around them. Didn't work. I was harming myself with excessive isolation. As I started rejoining society with my new yet limited philosophy, I met and befriended Greg at a bisexual event. He introduced me to Landmark Worldwide and the Human Awareness Institute. I resisted both for a long time. It sounded like more therapy and an opportunity for public ridicule. I finally signed up for their workshops because they promised I would find my own value from their programs, something I would discover for myself rather than something I would be taught. I was very skeptical and a little more than a bit afraid, but off to day one I went. Right they were. I got the key to what do no harm was going to come to mean to me. Read the high mission statement to see what I mostly mean now. It is reproduced and linked below and pretty much covers it. It isn't a perfect fit, but it is close enough. My added part is this: human beings are human beings. They will do harmful things and justify their words and actions. It doesn't make them bad, it just makes them human. So, by age 45, my personal philosophy of life was mostly set. It undergoes frequent, small revisions, mostly to maintain internal consistency. It is maybe impossible for any person to stop creating new, unsubstantiated beliefs in response to life's daily events. It is possible, though, to be on the lookout for them and to crush them under the heel of a well-constructed, strong, rational philosophy. Mine is based on being peaceful, loving, and joyful, no matter how society expects me to be, or what society expects me to feel in given situations. It is decidedly not based on superstition or the delusions of what is common. There it is, my path from superstition to rationality, from defining myself based on perceived flaws to generating myself based on a declared commitment. Here is my parting shot. If you have a treatable mental illness, get treated. If you are having trouble coping with life, seek a professional for guidance. But in all cases, consider your beliefs about yourself and your beliefs about others. Are any of those beliefs serving you? Are they just collections of opinions with truthiness? Or are they just adding to the trials of living a lifetime as a superstitious sapiens? I spent 25 years, starting at about age 10, fully and wrongfully convinced that I was either not human at all or severely defective. My beliefs about myself and others clearly were not serving me and did not represent reality. Create a life based on commitments grounded in what is real rather than what is hoped for. I want the world that High suggests in their various statements of purpose, and I am committed to a world in which all people can create their being based on peace, love, and joy. And if you want anything that looks or sounds like that, jump in. The water's fine. Create your personal philosophy using logical, rational reasoning, always checking your assumptions. And remember, your beliefs are not true simply because a lot of people share them. Peace, love, and joy to you.